Well, I'm afraid that once you understand the nature of Donald Trump's ego, the phone calls don't appear so strange. So he talks to Vladimir Putin, and Putin says, "Oh, we are the victims here. How Ukraine has hit our airfields with these drones, and this is terrible that they have attacked us. I'm afraid I will have to respond." And Trump, who usually listens to the last person he speaks to, says, "Oh yes, this is very terrible. Of course, Russia will have to retaliate." He says that in part because Putin has, what we would say, played him, but he says it in part because Trump has this very simple idea that he can bring peace to Ukraine and Russia. So any attack, even a justified attack like Ukraine's on the airfields, that prevents him from achieving that goal. I repeat, I think it's important here not to just look at Donald Trump. There are others in the Trump administration who do make decisions. There are some who, of course, are supportive of Russia, but there are others who are supportive of Ukraine. I think the envoy, Keith Kellogg, still knows the U.S. cannot side with Russia. I think their Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is balancing. And to be honest with you, the most effective way of dealing with the Trump administration is to show strength. Because if you show strength to officials like Kellogg, like Rubio, and others, if you show strength to agencies like the Pentagon, like the CIA, you show that it is not worth just giving up on Ukraine and siding with Russia. So Donald Trump is hopeless. Let's be honest here. Ukraine's resistance has to continue not alongside Trump, but despite Trump.
It is also interesting that Trump suggested that Ukraine itself provoked Russian retaliation by conducting this Operation Spiderweb. Moreover, Trump compared Russia and Ukraine to two fighting children. What is your assessment of these statements?
Well, I think the best response to the statement of Donald Trump that it was like children fighting in the playground was from President Zelensky, who said, this is not a child in a playground. This is a mass murderer named Vladimir Putin, who kills our civilians every day, every night. This is not a false equivalence of children who are either equally guilty or equally blameless. There is one party which is to blame here. If you have to use the playground analogy, there is one bully here, and there is one person, one country trying to defend itself. Again, I don't think Donald Trump sees that. I don't think he understands this. And I also have to say that we always have to recognize that beyond Donald Trump, as has been the case throughout the full-scale invasion, that there are activists, there are supposed former diplomats, there are economists like Jeffrey Sachs who say, oh, it was NATO that provoked this war, it was the U.S. that provoked this war, even that it was Ukraine that provoked this war. You know, all that nonsense from people who we think are experts is out there. It's just that we notice it more when Donald Trump, who's not an expert on anything, says, well, you know, Kyiv is to blame for the fact that Vladimir Putin wants to conquer it.
Let's also cover Trump's administration. What are the current chances of the US walking away from supporting Ukraine and from negotiations? And do you feel that this Ukraine's attack on Russia's aviation has changed something and has lowered the possibility of this?
No, I think we continue to be in a gray area with the Trump administration. You know, we know, despite there may be frustrations with the European Union, that it might be slow to deliver assistance or that it may be complicated, they will support Ukraine. We know that other countries, Canada, Australia, Japan, South Korea, they will support Ukraine. We know that this current Trump administration, there will be some officials who will never give full support to Ukraine, and that includes Donald Trump. We know that there are other officials who will not simply accept being the accomplice of Vladimir Putin. But we know that in this American system, it leads to a gray area where you're never fully removed from the situation, but you're never fully committed behind Ukraine. But I think I have to add a dimension on top of this that people are not seeing as much. The executive branch is not the only part of the American government. And what I think is increasingly important here is whether the U.S. Congress, beginning with the U.S. Senate, passes the sanctions measures to toughen the restrictions on Russia. We now have 82 of 100 senators who support these measures. Lindsey Graham, of course, has recently been in Ukraine. He has restated the need for the sanctions bill. There are indications from the Senate leadership that they may consider it as early as this month. I think that's very important because I think even if the U.S. executive is in a gray area, Congress passing the sanctions bill, especially if it's by a large enough majority that it cannot be vetoed by Donald Trump, it takes us out of that gray area. It shows us that, yes, in Washington, there still is clear support not only for the resistance, but to put some pressure on Russia.
However, according to the Wall Street Journal, Trump's administration is trying to weaken this bill by communicating with Lindsey Graham's office to amend this bill, remove some interesting statements, and replace the words like shall, might, with other words like may, just to weaken this document and just to make Donald Trump the only person who would be able to decide on whether impose sanctions on Russia. What is your assessment of this new effort of Trump's team to weaken this, at least this sanctions bill against Russia?
It is unsurprising that the Trump team would hold out against the sanctions bill as it is written, not just because they may not want to be that tough with Russia, but also because they would want to have the final decision on whether sanctions could be imposed. But the political reality here is that if the senators stand firm, if 67 senators stand firm, which is a veto-proof majority, if the House of Representatives follows with a two-thirds majority, Donald Trump cannot block this bill. He simply can't, given the way the U.S. system works. So we have a wait and see. We wait and see. Will the senators and the representatives say, no, we're not going to leave it up to you to decide on the extent of sanctions. We do have a say here. If they press this forward, it gives Trump at the very least a difficult choice. Does he try to oppose them or does he accept what they're doing? And it may even override his authority in this case. So if we tend to always have this idea that Donald Trump always makes the final decision in America. That's not the way it happens in the system. We just have to see if Congress finally steps up and does the right thing.
But do you believe that Republicans can be brave enough to make this decision on sanctions against Russia despite Trump's policy, despite his willingness or unwillingness to move forward with sanctions?
I mean, the key question is, will Republicans, as we say in America, put their money where their mouth is? We know that in terms of their rhetoric, they have stood up to the Trump administration in calling for a tougher position. We know this is true not only of individual senators like Lindsey Graham, but many senators, many representatives. But will they, as you put it, be brave enough to turn that into action? I think what we're seeing right now is the maneuvering that's going on. This bill could have been tabled weeks ago, and we're seeing the Trump administration trying to push it back. And we're seeing some senators saying, we're going to make this bill almost watertight. We're going to make sure that it can get passed in Congress. I can't guarantee that this bill will pass, and I certainly can't guarantee it will pass with a veto-proof majority. I do think, however, that this is, on most issues, the Republicans will bend the knee to Trump, especially on domestic issues. I think standing up to Russia or Ukraine is one issue where Republican congressmen have not wanted to be seen as being Trump's servants. And that's what gives me at least a little bit of hope that this bill may see the light of day, that it may pass.
Let's also cover a recent statement and recent clash between US President Donald Trump and Elon Musk. It was really interesting to observe, just to see this interesting conversation between both so-called former friends. Do you see the egos of both Trump and Elon Musk as one of the reasons why Musk left the White House?
Well, I think you know the answer to this. I think the egos of Donald Trump and Elon Musk are not just one reason why they've had this divorce. I think it is perhaps the reason. These are two narcissists. These are two men who not only express a confidence in what they do, they always want to be what we would call top dog. Now, it had been the position from January until last week that because the Trump administration relied on Elon Musk to almost destroy the U.S. government, to take his chainsaw to the agencies, to fire people, to force them to be loyal to Trump, to try to steal their information, strip their budgets, that Musk and Trump were kind of codependent on each other. But there were issues, there were difficulties. Elon Musk did not favor high tariffs on China because his Tesla company gets many of its components from China for the electric vehicles. Elon Musk was upset that his choice to head America's space agency, NASA, was blocked by some of Trump's advisors. And Elon Musk was in the middle of a dispute with some cabinet ministers, especially the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, about what he could and could not do. And indeed, he and Scott Bessent had a stand-up fight a few weeks ago in the White House. So there was this tension that was building. And then what pushed it over the edge is that Elon Musk sided with a minority, but an important group of Republican legislators who opposed Trump's tax cuts, spending cuts, and anti-immigrant legislation. Specifically, Musk came out in support of those legislators and said there needed to be even bigger spending cuts because this bill increases the U.S. deficit by $2.4 trillion over 10 years. And when Musk said that, especially when he called it a massive abomination, that triggered Trump. And so with the German chancellor alongside him last Thursday, he started to insult Musk. He said Musk had disappointed him. He implied that Musk was using drugs, something that he has come out and said privately to his aides. And he said that Musk was suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. So this became a personal battle. It wasn't just about the tax and the spending bill. It was now personal. And when you get men with big egos who get personal with each other, then this can get very serious.
Do you believe that Elon Musk can destroy a political figure of Donald Trump, his current political position, by criticizing him on social media and also by creating another party, as he suggested?
Elon Musk can make life difficult for Trump. And let's start with the question of this, what Trump calls his big, beautiful bill. These massive tax cuts, cutting programs like healthcare, increasing defense spending, cracking down on migrants. It only takes 4 senators of the 53 Republicans in the upper chamber to vote no, and that would just block this bill. Well, there are already at least 4 Republican senators who have expressed doubts about this, and Elon Musk can magnify and endorse their opposition, and indeed he has done so. Now, if that bill does not pass, Donald Trump looks politically weak. He has not actually achieved the one major bill that he has proposed so far in his second term. Beyond that, I don't think Elon Musk will join the Democratic Party. I don't think the Democratic Party will have Musk, to be honest with you. I don't think Musk will form a third party. It's very tough to get a third party to succeed in U.S. politics. But Elon Musk can run or support opponents of Donald Trump's candidates in next year's congressional elections. Remember, in the U.S. system, you have what we call primaries, where the Republicans pick their candidates for the Senate and for the House. And Donald Trump might be supporting a particular Republican, and Elon Musk will say, well, I'll support this other guy. And he has a lot of money that he can put into that. And indeed, this is exactly how Donald Trump took control of the Republican Party. He ran his people against Republican incumbents, got a lot of them into the Senate and into the House of Representatives. Now, if Musk can do the same thing, he poses the same problem for Donald Trump that Donald Trump posed for Republicans several years ago.
Let's also cover another interesting battle clash between US President Donald Trump and California Governor Christopher Newsom. Also, Trump decided to deploy National Guard to Los Angeles amid current protests. What is your assessment of this another Trump's clash between his office and California governor's office?
Donald Trump has disliked Gavin Newsom for quite some time. And indeed, Donald Trump has tried to curb the powers of California as a state for some time. But this is a much wider issue, and arguably one that points to the level of the crisis within the United States. This possible crisis starts with the Trump administration's attempt for mass deportation and indeed detention, disappearance of migrants and asylum seekers, just sweeping them off the streets, not giving them a hearing, denying them the rule of law, in some cases sending hundreds to El Salvador and hiding them in that prison there where they cannot be found by their families or indeed by lawyers. Now, when they tried to do this in California in recent days, it started protests, especially in Los Angeles near the detention facility. Now, these protests were largely peaceful. I have to emphasize this. On Saturday night, there were only two protesters that were arrested for assaults on police officers. But that became the excuse for the Trump administration, first of all, to call up the National Guard. And they now have 4,000 people from the National Guard in Los Angeles. And then to call up 700 Marines. Now, they probably do not have the constitutional authority to do this. I could explain this to you in a longer interview. But in effect, they are defying the law and they're defying the state government because the National Guard is actually part of the state forces, not the national forces. They're defying the governor of California. They're defying the mayor of Los Angeles to do two things. One is they're doing it so that they cannot be opposed on what they do regarding immigration. But more widely, they're doing it to militarize the United States, to use the military as part of their attempt to expand their powers. If this happened in another country, you would call it authoritarian. And indeed, although I think the U.S. is a long way even from being China or Vladimir Putin's Russia or even Viktor Orban's Hungary, certainly the Trump administration is going that way. And one way, if you're an authoritarian, is you take control of military forces and you use them against your own people. These protests are over a serious issue. These protests largely had been within the law. So we need to be very clear here. That is, Donald Trump prepares for a celebration with a military parade in Washington on Saturday, the day that he turned 79. He wants to show that he has all the power in the United States, that it does not belong to the states or to the courts or even to Congress.
And also, do you see the California governor, Mr. Newsom, as a possible candidate from the Democratic Party at the next U.S. general election?
Certainly, Gavin Newsom has been mentioned as a possible candidate for president for the Democrats. Indeed, he was mentioned even after Joe Biden stepped down, and again in 2028. But I think it's a very open race for that presidential nomination. And I think it's very difficult for a Democrat from California to get that nomination. I realize that Kamala Harris was from California. That was kind of a special case. California is portrayed by the Republicans as being a very liberal state that is not representative of America. The Democrats, I think, are much more likely to go from a candidate that is from a swing state. You could think about a Governor Whitmer of Michigan, a Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania, a Governor Pritzker of Illinois, or indeed from a state which is Republican, and that's the Democratic Governor Beshear from Kentucky. So no, I don't think Gavin Newsom's presidential ambitions, if they are there, are not at the center of this conflict over the military being deployed in Los Angeles.
Thank you, Professor Lucas, for your time and for your support for Ukraine, and glory to Ukraine.
Thank you, viewers. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава, thank you very much.